My name is Chris Connor from Life Science Marketing Radio. I have with me today Donna Schelby, the CEO at Innovative Research, to talk about that company and her journey to becoming a CEO from outside the sciences, which I think is an interesting story. Donna, welcome.
Thank you so much. And yes, I don't think we get much better outside the sciences than coupons, which I came from. So, yeah, good story.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about where innovative research sits in the life science biotech ecosystem. Give me some examples of who your end users are and the type of
Mhm.
things for which they use your products.
Yeah, so innovative research is if you think in the world of, say, pharmaceutical or drug development, that kind of R&D environment, we're going to sit at the very beginning, the discovery phase of any kind of research that goes on. So if there was a negative one, we would be it. We are 100% in vitro. We do no in vivo products whatsoever. And the organizations we work most with are academia, both domestic and international. We work with the government, domestic and international, local and federal, anything from your local forensic lab to the NIH, we're working with for their needs. Let's see, the biotech, of course, research hospitals, and we have a number of distributor partners around the globe that assist us in distribution internationally. So, and how they use it again is very early in the phase. We are research use only, we are in vitro only, and so we are very early in the process of discovery, which we actually love to be part of because we're part of the start, we're part of the beginning, that foundation of what happens in the future, which is fun and exciting.
And talk a little bit, I mean, we're going to get into this, I think, but what kinds of products? Because it's not the what I would call as a scientist the typical off the shelf
Right.
reagents, right?
Right. So we like to say we specialize in the weird. So whether it's animal biologicals or human biologicals, and we run the gamut. As you think of biologicals and fluids, if it's secreted, we probably collect it and make it available to our researchers. So human and animal biologicals, kits for early assay, proteins, antibodies, all of those items that are necessary for that early stage development and research. We are the organization that seeks those out through our network to figure out how to get it into the hand of the researchers in the way that they need it.
Yeah, that segues perfectly to my next question is we often think about biotech companies as either growing or manufacturing products. You gather samples, as you say. If it's excreted, you get it. Of specific biological materials, right? To answer very specific questions. So describe that effort because that's a part of the industry I think a lot of people don't always think about or and definitely don't see.
Yeah. So when we think about what we're manufacturing, we do have a manufacturing arm. We do manufacture kits. We manufacture proteins and antibodies and depleted serums. And we do that manufacturing, but the real core of why we engage with our researchers is about finding the left-handed male IBS patient who has ingrown toenails, right? It gets so specific, and I'm being tongue in cheek here, but it really does get specific as to what our researchers are looking for because they have such nuance to what they're doing. It requires us to build a network of organizations and individuals that we work with to combine those elements to get to the researcher what they need in the size that they need it. So it is a network that we build to make sure that we can provide to our researchers ultimately that animal or human biological that is specific to the very niche research that they might be doing.
All right. You didn't come from a life science background. As you mentioned at the beginning, coupons, and we can talk about that as if you like, but what I
I could go
heard a
for
bit of
days,
the story
23 years, I
and
could go for days.
I think it's fascinating and impressive, but I want to ask you what did you find to be the most surprising thing? I mean, you just mentioned left-handed IBS, but of your actual catalog, the most surprising thing that innovative research is selling to scientists.
Chris, it changes every week. I would struggle to come up with the most surprising thing. I can reflect back on that first week starting 4 years ago and having that hallway conversation. Back when people weren't working from home, it was pre-pandemic, and we were having hallway conversations about projects or things that were coming up in the business. And we had a request for 50 liters of horse urine. I will never forget that conversation because in the back of my mind, I'm laughing. We're talking about 50 liters of horse urine. Somebody's going to make a joke. Somebody's going to crack a smile. Somebody's going to say some comment about the fact that we're talking about 50 liters of horse urine. Nope. It was every day. It was an everyday conversation about the weight and how we're going to ship it. And it was so every day. And so every week, a week does not go by that we get a request of something that surprises me. I mean, it just shows you how naive I was in week one that horse urine would surprise me because the things that I see now, it's like, well, of course we're being asked for that because I'm sure it exists somewhere. So it's a very interesting process. And that's part of the fun that comes through the business is, okay, this is what we were asked for. Look at our network. Where do we go? How do we figure this out? And that's part of the fun. It is truly part of the fun of our organization is those researchers who come to us and say, okay, I've got one for you. This is what I'm looking for. And being able to supply that, there's a certain kind of pride that comes in finding some of those things.
And then everything, I mean, what that really brings up is that may not be something that you have all the time, but
Right.
it sounded like people come to you with very specific requests. And then, selling things, which you probably certainly weren't used to in 100 microliter quantities, like, barely enough, wouldn't fill a thimble.
Right. Yeah. So what's interesting about innovative research, very early in the interview process, in the onboarding process, one of the things that was made exceptionally clear to me was that we don't sell product in the sizes that are convenient for us. We sell products in the size that's convenient and required by the researcher. That is really the crux as to why innovative research was created. It was because it's by two researchers who were doing research who couldn't get what they needed, or what they needed was in such large quantities that for their budgets, they couldn't afford to get it. And that's why that they teamed up to even start innovative research, is to make accessible those products that can be inaccessible, especially at a very small level. So if you think about it, if you have a grant that has a limited amount of dollars associated to it, and you only need 100 UL of COVID convalescent plasma to succeed in testing your diagnostic, you don't want to have to buy 100 milliliters because that's cost out the door. And so we're very sensitive to what's going on in the industry, COVID being a perfect example. We created sample sets of 100 UL diagnostic sets so that they could go and test their tools and have positive and negative samples to go do what they needed to do, because that's what the industry needed to test their diagnostic. And that's what we want to be.
Nice. You're, in some sense, your company's like a chef foraging for raw materials in the forest for researchers to use. I'm sure you scroll through your website occasionally and wonder what these things are for. You don't have to tell me the answer to
I
that.
probably don't know.
Which is, that's a great segue to what we're going to talk about now. So let's talk about your journey, the theme of which is, as you've gone through your career, you have just made a habit or a skill out of figuring things out as you go. Describe some of the things you were doing before you came to innovative research.
Yeah, I have two general core beliefs that I think hold true to anyone. One is, just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't do it. And the second is, you know more than you think you know. I think that's true for most people, and we tend to doubt ourselves versus trust ourselves. And that has held true through my career. So when asked to move to Ohio for a major manufacturer in Ohio to sell coupons to have them within a month of me moving down there, we're not going to do coupons anymore. When I just uprooted my life and figuring out how to get them back to that environment, or moving over to Europe to teach people how to sell coupons to industry that had never used coupons before. For a while, in some European countries, coupons were illegal. And so the idea of doing this is completely foreign. So I need to teach them. I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to combine $2 billion companies and figure out the sales and marketing structure for those combined entities. Never done that before, but tapped to do it and be part of the team that figures that out. Go run the operations of a biotech. Never done it before, but I can figure it out. Design a research protocol and implement an IRB for human collection protocols. Never done it, but I'll figure it out. And that has been the history of, I think, many people, without articulating it, I think that's a lot of people's success, is that I don't know how to do that, but I will figure it out. I did figure it out. What's next that I can figure out? And that's truly been the process of my career. And usually people identifying things that they thought I could figure out that would have never even crossed my mind to attempt. And trusting what others saw is a big part of my career progression.
I often say curiosity is a superpower.
I have heard that. We have a consultant that has a very similar saying. I agree.
Can you give an example of, for example, I'm fascinated by just say merging $2 billion companies and figuring out the marketing structure. How did you go about that? Like, what were the resources you used? What's your thought process about what would need to happen?
You know, it's interesting because very early in my career at that same organization, I was asked to figure out the responsibilities of customer service versus marketing versus sales. So delivery versus sale development. What's the delineation, the point in time? And part of that project outcome was understanding that it's not the actual technical act that's being done. It's the deliverable that decided whether or not that was a customer service action or if that was a sales execution action. And going back to that project really helped me in that design, because what we ended up doing is stepping back and saying, what are all of the deliverables that come from a marketing organization and a sales organization? And some of them have common actions, but have independent next steps. And so what we did is we divided up all of those and grouped appropriate deliverables together and not people. The last thing we did was the people. So it was about the business need and deliverables. And then based off of those business needs and deliverables, how do you design an organization around those deliverables? Especially when you had two print companies coming together that have duplication and different intentions in how they do things. So finding those commonalities and what's being delivered is ultimately how we created that organization.
Interesting. Okay, so what attracted you to healthcare and biotech? How did you make this leap? It had to be exciting, but also a little nerve-wracking.
It was a little nerve-wracking, yeah. So I was part of there was new leadership at the organization I was at, and they wanted their own leadership team. And so after 23 years in the coupon industry, my role was eliminated, and off I go to find out what's next for me. And so print media, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Chris, but print media has not been in a growth mode for a while. Not a big surprise.
Say it isn't so.
Say it isn't so. I know. Newspapers, print coupons, direct mail, all of that stuff been in decline. And so what I knew is that I felt like I was fighting that uphill battle constantly in print media. And I was done. I was over my time with print media. I wanted something different. And I live in the Detroit area. And so if there's one industry that is dominant in the Detroit area, it's automotive. And I was pretty confident I didn't want to go into the automotive industry. So here I was with 23 years of experience in an industry I did not want to pursue, living in an environment that is automotive predominant, and I didn't want to get into that. So as I sat back and said, okay, I know what I don't want to do. What do I want to do? And I knew I wanted something that I felt good about contributing to society as a whole. And I wanted something that was in growth. And in the time period that I was in my transition, Michigan had legalized recreational marijuana. And I became very interested in that because I'm like, well, if there's going to be a growth area, it's going to be marijuana in Michigan. Like that's a place to really start building some business. And so I started investigating and I reached out to a network of people across the country who were already in the business of CBD production and how they do that, because the area of marijuana uh, sales in the recreational side, I was interested in the testing side. How to regulate the industry is where my interest lied. And so I was talking to different organizations across the country, talking to the owners. What did they do? How did they get started? And what happened is my network on my social media started to shift from that coupon print to this research, cannabis, recreational. So my network started to shift, and based, all the algorithms, as my network shifted, those job opportunities shifted that were delivered to me. And what was delivered to me was this innovative research VP of operations role that I found interesting. That was in the biotech. It was a growth area. It wasn't automotive. It wasn't print media. This sounds interesting. And I pursued it. And, to this day, I look back at that interview and I smiled to myself, because if there was true authenticity in an interview, that was it, because I am not a scientist. I think I was waving my hand saying, we all know I'm not a scientist. As I'm sitting here in this room having this interview, I am business. I am not science. And it was a really great conversation. It was a long conversation, but it was a really great conversation. And ultimately I ended up here. So that was the route. Marijuana was the route.
That'll be the nugget that we use to promote this whole
Excellent.
thing.
Excellent.
What's interesting to me there is, we think about, how the algorithms drive what we see, but for you, the algorithm put you where you are.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's driving our careers, not just
it followed me. It followed
our
me.
newsfeed.
It read me, and it presented to me what I needed to see at the time.
Excellent. So you got that job. Obviously, you're still here. You started by working on the website.
Yeah.
And now you're the CEO. Describe the experience of a first-time CEO in a new industry, and you can give whatever examples you want. I'm thinking about your first conference.
Yeah, you remember that. Yeah. So moving into a new industry, everybody has that, what's the word I'm looking for? That when you feel like a fake, an imposter, that imposter syndrome. If anybody had the imposter syndrome going to their first bio conference 2 months, 3 months after starting in this new industry, it was me. And I was really excited about it. I have to admit, I learned an amazing amount of insight going to that conference. So it was hugely valuable. But they had this opportunity where they would allow you to make appointments with other people who were attending the conference, and you could sit down and have this conversation. And I made as many appointments as I possibly could because I wanted to get our name out. I wanted to make sure people were aware of us. I wanted to start having this conversation. So I'm in my very first appointment that is set up. And so I sit down and I'm having this conversation with this gentleman from, if I remember correctly, it was a cancer research organization, a very prominent one. And I was so excited to get this meeting. And I sat down, I was explaining who we are and what we do. And I got done with my spiel. And the very first thing he says to me is, "You're not a scientist." And I was crestfallen. I was completely crestfallen because I thought I had prepared and I thought it was so ready. And I said, "So what is it? What did I do?" I said, "You're right. But what did I do? What did I get wrong?" And he said, "Oh no, your presentation was fine, but you were looking at me in the eye the entire time. So I knew you couldn't possibly be a scientist." And I just remember thinking, that's what busts me. That's what kind of put me over the edge, is the fact that I look at people in the eye when they're speaking to me. So that was a very memorable event. So that transition, it was a tough one. It was hard to speak the language when you don't know the language at all. And over time, I have gotten more comfortable. I have some friends going, "Who are you? Like, what are these words coming out of your mouth?" So it has become more natural. I am still not a scientist, but the lab knows that in a pinch, I'm in there helping out in the lab if I can, and when there's a real need. Now, do they give me really complicated things to do? But I will be there and I will help them if I can. So, which helps me learn, quite honestly. So yeah, that's
Yeah, well,
really important.
science doesn't go anywhere without people telling stories about it, right?
That's true.
And
That's true.
figuring out how to solve all the problems around the science problems. How did you figure out, or what were your early priorities? So you come into a new business, obviously you have plenty of business experience and growing things, looking around like, where do we focus our effort?
Yeah. So when I first started in 2019, yeah, where as I was in my career, the reference to laying the wire in the belly of the jumbo jet, there's nothing glamorous about it. There's nothing that people want to, people don't get on a plane and talk about the wires in the belly of the jet. However, they're really glad that they're there at 30,000 feet, right? And that's what we worked on when I first started at Innovative Research. We worked on um, a tight website, naming conventions of clients and products, the infrastructure of job descriptions so people knew what they were accountable for, performance reviews against those job descriptions, a lot of HR, IT, infrastructure, just making sure that there's something to lean on as you grow. Because if there's nothing underneath you when you try to grow, you're going to fall fast. And the first, I would say 2 years was really focused on infrastructure. And then it starts to become okay, we have the infrastructure. We know who does what. Now we can start to lean in and move forward. And that next lean in became the acquisition of Molecular Innovations, which happened in October 21, which ultimately resulted in my promotion to CEO.
Yeah, what stands out to me there is the importance of processes and systems. This is not my natural inclination, but I can imagine you jump into a company that you want to grow and you go, let's get some new products, or let's do this and that, and skipping over the wires in the belly of the aircraft.
Yeah. It's not
And,
sexy. It is not sexy stuff, but it is hugely beneficial when you get to the point where you start to expand what your company is able to provide, and you can see who has what skill and you know how to leverage those skills, what's not working and what you have to stop doing, which is sometimes more painful than the things you want to start, is what I've definitely learned. Stopping things that we've done in the past because we've always done them, it's really hard to stop. So those are some of the more challenging things to navigate through with your team.
I just admire the discipline it takes to do that and not chase every shiny object that comes in front of you, right?
That is true.
And essentially that may be the essence of a CEO's job, right? I mean, you have to have a vision, but you also have to understand
what to start,
how
what
to
to
get
stop,
there.
and what to continue. Yeah. Find the shiny object, agree on the shiny object, and then focus on the shiny object. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So speaking of what shiny objects are on the horizon for you? What opportunities do you see going forward?
I have this. The best thing about moving into a role where you're not an expert in the industry that you're in is that you hire amazing people who are incredibly intelligent, way smarter than I am. And I love that. And so, what that allows is I can bring these people together and they can tell me what they see as it relates to research and what direction we're going. So I have this amazing group of people that I get to work with who keep their pulse on, yes, where research is, but we don't have time to react to research once it's happening. We have to see it before because we're so early in the process. If there's something that a researcher needs, we need to know about it before they start. So our life cycle of a customer, we have big gaps in between times of sales with them. So because we'll have a client who's working early stage and they progress to preclinical and then they get through clinical. Those can take years. And we might have thousands of dollars of revenue from them in 2018. And then in 2024, they'll come, we're back, we're starting a new project. And we have that. And so it's my team, my job and my team's job to stay in touch with that group, to make sure that we understand what's next. What are they going to be working on next? And build that trust in that relationship with our customer network so that we can then re-engage with our partner network to say, this is what we're hearing. As we talk to you about this, what can you tell us about XYZ that we need to prepare for? So with the pandemic, it was COVID, plasma, and serum, and viral transport media. Those became things that are the hot topic, and then that dies down, and the next thing becomes popular. So staying in front of that is a great part of how the team comes together and says, this is what we need to focus on. This is what the researchers are telling us. This is where we need to go. And that's a lot of fun.
That's an interesting challenge as a CEO and a company, not only for the up and downs in revenue from individual customers, but keeping those relationships going so that they do come back to you the next time around when, in fact, their whole team may have turned over in the meantime as well, right?
And that's true. That is very true. And what I have found is we have some team members who have been with Innovative for a long time. And if there's anybody listening to this podcast who has ever worked with Innovative Research, they probably know Carl. And Carl is the guy who maintains those relationships. He's just an amazing customer service focused person. And I would almost guarantee you that most of the people who have worked with Innovative Research are going, oh yeah, Carl's the guy. Right? And so we have a collection, and we're breeding those Carls, right? So now we have a Stephanie, and we have a Grace, and we have an Adam, and we have this great team that has been coached from the original. And it's just really fun to see that the joy of developing those relationships has spread throughout that team, and they truly take pride and joy in maintaining those relationships. And they're like, I own that relationship's mine. I want that one. So they're really protective of their customers, and they care for them deeply, and it's great to see.
Nice. You may have already sort of talked about this, but how do you evaluate where to put your money and effort?
Listening to the customers primarily and trying to get ahead of it. But there's also times where we just get behind, and we'll see a spike of interest in something, and we can't keep up with that volume. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because there's a pandemic and human beings don't like to leave their house, and they don't necessarily want to donate biologicals. That really creates pressure on your supply chain. And so when we're focused on where do we invest, we're investing in that network. It's so strange to say, but what a lot of organizations want to throw away as waste, especially biological waste, are like, oh, well, what you got there? What are you throwing away? So we're interested. So any partners out there who are interested, who are throwing something away, it might have value to a researcher somewhere. And it's shocking to me how often the relationships that we build are from organizations who have waste that they're trying to figure out what to do with. And there's true opportunity all over the place as it relates to in just creating that conversation. So our network has been built from, there's organizations whose true intention is to create biologicals and to make those tools available to researchers. But there's others who don't realize that they even have that capability because it's not being viewed as valuable to somebody else. And so if there's anything being thrown away, sales@inno-research.com. Let us know. We're going to want to hear about it. I almost guarantee you, because you never know what a researcher is going to want.
Excellent. All right. What's the next thing to figure out? Last question.
The next thing to figure out. So I keep going back to the network. The biggest thing and the ongoing thing to figure out is a sustainable supply chain. Any industry right now is faced with a sustainable supply chain. That is truly where our focus is. So whether we investigate and we say, you know what, this is something we have to build ourselves because we can't partner, we're going to build it ourselves and we will invest there. But if we can't find a partner, that's where we want to go and figure out that mutually beneficial agreement with that partner, how we can make that work. So that is what is ongoing with our business. is that supply chain, but then also what can we bring internally that we're currently externally accessing so that we can rely more heavily on ourselves as supply chain is always an opportunity.
Okay, we might end it there, but I lied about the last question. So, just for fun,
Okay.
I'm a stranger and we just met at a cocktail party.
Mm-hmm.
So, tell me what you do.
So what do I do? So I work for a biotech, and I'm not going to lie, a lot of what I have to talk about is generally not appropriate for when consuming food. I'm just going to tell you right now. Because it has a lot to do with human biofluids, and these are things that people don't like to enjoy next to their cocktail weenies. So, but yeah, I work for biotech, and I am in the business of making sure researchers get the biologicals and the reagents that they need to do research around the world for diagnostics, cures, and treatment.
Donna, Schelby, this has been a treat talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. I truly appreciate it.